Observe Your Body by Rye. In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety. Keep listening to see what's next.
I hope you're smiling because it's me, Rye. Hi everyone, today I'm with a very special guest. I am with Alex Raymond. She's a registered dietitian and certified eating disorder specialist. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I have a few questions for you. I'm very big into the world of nutrition. I'm a registered dietitian to be, and I look up to you. I think you're amazing. So I have a few questions about what you do and your field. Are you ready to answer them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so sweet. So I'm excited.
Okay, I'm so excited too. So can you first explain the role of a dietitian in treating eating disorders and how their approach differs from other healthcare professionals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So typically when we're working with a client who has an eating disorder diagnosis, we're part of a team. So it'll be us kind of doing the food and nutrition side of things. I know especially at my practice, like some of the things that we really like doing is not only like the nutrition education piece, talking about the food science, talking about how food works in our body, why food is important, all of that stuff. But we also like supporting our clients and working in exploring their relationship with food. So maybe taking a look at like how diet culture impacts their life, or like the first time they remember going on a diet, what their family's relationship with food looks like and how that affects them. So, we as dietitians, we tend to dig a little bit deeper on like the food piece, as well as body image and movement, where a therapist is going to address maybe other mental health concerns that might be going on concurrently with the eating disorder, and then also kind of get to the root cause of like why this eating disorder happened, why it was triggered, and what different factors kind of contribute to it.
Absolutely. So you have a very important job, and I'm so happy that so many people have you because I know that you help so many, especially in today's society. So
thanks. Yeah, diet culture is very big, and there's a lot of weight stigma and just rules that we hear about food all the time. Different fad diets are coming out, and of course like all the body standards that exist. So yeah.
So actually, going into that, how do you address body image concerns with clients who might have body dysmorphic disorder?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So I'm just going to clarify in case your listeners like don't know or are curious, but an eating disorder, and whether, it's bulimia, anorexia, binge eating disorder, quote unquote other eating disorder, those are all separate diagnoses than body dysmorphic disorder. So those are kind of like two separate things in the DSM-5, which is basically this big manual that lays out the criteria for mental health disorders, right? So yeah, you have eating disorders and then body dysmorphic disorder. A lot of people who have eating disorders also have body dysmorphia, right? Which means that they have like a warped perception of what their body might look like. And then, there's also people who have an eating disorder and like you can also diagnose them with body dysmorphic disorder. So again, just wanted to clarify for any listeners who maybe didn't really know the difference or didn't know that there was a distinction there. So with body dysmorphic disorder, we would work actually really closely with a therapist, because a therapist would do a lot of support with the client in order to like explore their body dysmorphic disorder and to kind of, create certain challenges or coping tools that the client can use in order to like feel more at ease in their body. And I know what we do a lot as dietitians, and I think this can really apply to someone who has body dysmorphia or has someone who has body dysmorphic disorder, is we talk a lot about people's values and how that might connect back to their bodies. So for example, if a person really values like their friends and going out to dinner, going to, work lunches with their friends or going to prom with their friends, like whatever it is, right? They enjoy spending time with the people who they care about, but they're noticing that the way that they feel in their body is preventing them from doing those things. We kind of might have a conversation with them about how they can challenge that a little bit of like, what would it be like to, even if you feel really, really bad in your body and really uncomfortable, like what would it be like if you still went out to dinner with your friends? Because that's going to be so much fun and super enjoyable. And then you're challenging the eating disorder and telling it like, hey, this doesn't, like, even though I don't feel great today, like I'm going to go out with my friends and I'm going to try to have a lot of fun.
I love that.
Know if that makes sense. Yeah.
I love that so much. It's like you're not letting it define you, and you're still getting out of your house instead of like, sitting all in a ball on the floor, like letting those thoughts win,
Right. Yes.
And something that you mentioned is there are other kinds of eating disorders that might not be in the DSM-5 code. Do you have any that like you can list off for the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think.
I know orthorexia is one that we'll hear around.
Yep. So orthorexia is a term for, again, if your listeners don't know, a term for people who kind of have a quote unquote obsession with healthy eating. So there might not be like body image disturbance. Like a lot of people with orthorexia might realize like, ooh, like actually like I'm not eating enough to sustain, my body or whatever, but they have a really hard time because there's this obsession with finding foods that might be quote unquote clean by society standards or like have, certain ingredients or whatever. So orthorexia is one of them. I don't think there's also a diagnosis. I don't think that this is in the DSM-5, but I don't know. Someone might correct me. It's called atypical anorexia. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
Okay. So
it's probably not. It's probably not in there. You're probably right. So there we go.
Right. Yeah. So atypical anorexia is it's again just kind of shows the weight bias that our society has, because it's basically the same thing as anorexia. People experience the same body image disturbances. They experience the same guilt and shame and fear around food, but the only difference is they might not meet a weight requirement. So a lot of people who have people who have atypical anorexia, they might be in a larger body. They might have, a quote unquote, normal BMI. Don't really use BMI, but just so people can kind of predict, picture in their heads. Like, so it's really interesting, that we have this like separate diagnosis for atypical anorexia, even though it has the same physical consequences, emotional consequences, the same types of behaviors, and symptoms.
Absolutely.
So I like to bring that one up.
Yeah,
too.
Thank you for educating me and my listeners on that, because I feel like we don't really hear about either one of these terms, and people can still struggle with them even though they're not in the DSM-5.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's something too that I feel like I'm glad that you said that people can still struggle even if it's not in the DSM-5, because at the end of the day, like, sure, diagnosing criteria can be really helpful. And like, bottom line, if your relationship with food is impacting your life, if it's impacting your happiness or your health, like, you deserve to get treatment, right? It doesn't really matter if you meet any sort of criteria.
Absolutely. So my next question is, can you share some strategies for promoting a healthy body image and self-esteem in individuals recovering from an eating disorder, or maybe just, in anyone in today's society?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So something that I'll plug really quickly on our website, if that's okay.
Oh, go for it, girl. You're a girl boss. I want you to do that.
So we actually have a free body image workbook. That's on our website. It's free to download. I want to say you go to couragetonourished.com/resources. You do have to sign up for our newsletter in order to have access to the body image workbook. But that could be a good place to start. We have a lot of people who are our clients, and they'll do the workbook and bring it to session, or if they're not our clients, they might go and bring it, to their therapy session or whatever. So that's that. And part of the reason why I bring it up too is because we actually have something in that workbook called the body image spectrum.
Oh, I love that.
So one of basically, like, why I like the spectrum is it shows that, like, body image is something that's like constantly developing and changing. Like one day a person might have a really awesome body image, feel really good in their body, and the next day they could feel not so good. And again, that's just because we're human, and like different things affect us in different ways. So really the baseline of having a good relationship or a better relationship with your body is something called body respect. And basically the whole idea behind it is, even if you don't like how your body looks, even if you feel really uncomfortable in your body, you can still make decisions to show your body respect. So if you're sick, that might mean staying home from work or school. It might mean taking your medications, it might mean going to your therapy session, even if you really don't want to go. If you have an eating disorder, it might be following your meal plan, even though you don't really want to follow your meal plan. So again, just kind of finding all of these ways to show your body respect. That's like a really helpful tool to get you out of like a body hatred place and start to move in a direction of like, okay, I can feel more neutral about my body.
I love the way that you just said that. It's perfect. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. You're very good at your job. I mean, as someone, I suffer from a chronic illness, and I'll wake up and I'll not feel very well. And I still show my body respect. Even if I don't feel like I'm doing yoga or working out, I still make sure I do it because I know in the end I'll feel better. And the way you just said that describes it perfectly for anyone going through anything, really.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was perfect. So my next question is, how do you address concerns with clients who might suffer from body dysmorphia or eating disorders in general?
Mm-hmm. Just concerns. How do I address concerns?
Yeah, that just kind of to touch on what we just talked about a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess if we're talking about someone who has an eating disorder or struggling with their body, a lot of what we'll do what I'll do in a session with a dietitian is coming up with weekly goals, which I know might sound like a little bit silly and basic, but
no, it's okay.
We're working with, and sometimes the goals might be just they might be really small. A goal might be like, let's just add one thing to breakfast, or like, let's have birthday cake this week because, it's my sister's birthday and I'm celebrating with her or whatever. I know I mentioned values before. So a lot of the times we'll try to tie these goals back to the values and what a person, wants their recovery to look like. So that tends to make the goals maybe a little bit more motivating, right? We have a lot of conversations about how completing small goals is like, even though it might feel kind of small in the moment, over time it builds and builds and builds, where recovery feels a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels more doable.
Are there any misconceptions about eating disorders that you want to address while we're talking about this?
Yeah, there's a lot. So the biggest one or the one that I think is the most important to address is, just like any other mental health diagnosis, like eating disorders don't discriminate. So literally anyone can have an eating disorder, right? Like it doesn't discriminate based on gender or race or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or body size, right? So we talked a little bit about this earlier with atypical anorexia, that even someone, who doesn't quote unquote look like they have anorexia, like can have anorexia and can be malnourished. And the reason why I like bringing that one up is especially for providers, because I think oftentimes healthcare workers can do a disservice by not screening everyone for an eating disorder, or like minimizing eating concerns for clients who might not fit like their preconceived notion of what someone with an eating disorder looks like, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the one that I always like to address. Another one too that I think can be really important for clients and their families is that eating disorders aren't a choice. I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, my loved one has an eating disorder. I don't understand why she just eats, or why she doesn't just eat, right? Like, can't she just, get better, whatever, and it's not something that a person chooses, right? It is a mental health condition. So yeah, just keeping in mind that like while a person doesn't choose an eating disorder, there are steps that they can take towards recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's something that's really important for anyone listening to know, especially if they have an eating disorder or someone they love has an eating disorder. How do you approach food and meal planning with clients who are struggling with, maybe any of the body image issues we talked about or an eating disorder in itself?
Sure. Yeah. So with this, we tend to we approach it in a couple different ways. So one of our goals is to provide our clients with like fuel to fight back against the eating disorder. So if someone is, and we do that through nutrition education. So let's say someone has an eating disorder thought that like a certain food or a certain food group is bad. What we might do during a session is talk about like, well, why do you think that food group is bad? Where does that come from? When did you start cutting out that food group? Kind of like assessing how that happened and like why the eating disorder picked up on that specific food or food group being bad. And then we might provide nutrition education as to why like our bodies actually need that food group. So something that we hear often, I can give an example, is that like carbs are bad.
I just thought that too. Oh my gosh. We read each other's minds.
Yep. Yeah. So we hear that all the time. Carbs are bad, limit carbs, certain carbs are good, whatever. So we talk so much about how important carbs are for our bodies. If and your listeners don't know, carbs are actually the most important like macronutrient. Our brains run on carbohydrates, our muscles run on carbs, our like entire body. Carbs are basically like gas for our body. Exactly. Like we need it in order to function. So this way, if our clients kind of have that education when their eating disorder is putting these thoughts into their brain of like, oh my goodness, carbs are bad, they can talk back and say, okay, actually, here's what I learned from my dietitian. Carbs aren't bad. I'm going to kind of fight the eating disorder, do this opposite action, and have carbs at my lunch.
I love that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And it's cool that, like, I was just going to bring that up, that one of them that really bothers me is hearing carbs are bad. It's all about educating yourself on the benefits of carbohydrates for your body.
Right, absolutely.
And I love that you're like based around education. I think that's very important, especially for individuals trying to kind of learn what's, going on with, them and these thoughts that they're having. I think it's important in providing comfort and knowledge at the same time. So I love what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
So how does social media play a role in contributing to body image and eating disorders? And how do you help clients navigate this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there are a lot of studies, like I'm sure you could do a Google search about how social media is impacting our body image. I think especially in teens, but really with all ages, right? I don't think anyone is immune to the effects of social media. So we work with a lot of teens who, again, I say teens just because they tend to be the people who are like using it most, like teens and college students. But yeah, just a lot of people who see images on social media and basically are taught that they like should look like that, right? Yes. And we have to do a lot of education, right? Again, with the education about how oftentimes the bodies that we see on social media, probably don't look like the bodies that we see in real life. There's a lot of Photoshop, a lot of editing, which I think the fact that like influencers do a lot of photoshopping and editing speaks to the body standards that we have, right? Like, would they be as popular on social media if they weren't putting their resources into kind of curating their bodies to look a certain way? So we'll talk a lot about that, and we'll talk about like whether or not they think that there's any benefits to social media, right? Yeah. We have some clients who decide not to use it anymore after like having a conversation, or just they want to take a little bit of a break. And sometimes what we'll do is like during a session, we'll go through, go through social media with a client and like basically talk to them about maybe unfollowing certain accounts, following other accounts, or just talking to them in general, like how seeing certain images are affecting their body image, their relationship with food, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. You have to do what's best for you at the end of the day. And, I love that you take the time and go through it with them to make it easier. And, something that you mentioned that kind of reminded me of a saying I like is you can't compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. And we have to think about it as like on social media, people pick probably the best photo of them, their body's at a certain angle where they, they like it most. They look quote unquote slimmer in that angle or however, people are choosing what they put out there. So no one's going to post the day where they look bad or, they think they look bad or, where they're very bloated or etc. So we have to think about it as that. And, you're right. A lot of people edit their photos to look better, which unfortunately shows how toxic our society can be with the standards. So I'm glad we have people like you out there to help individuals struggling.
Yeah, I love the highlight reel quote too, because I think even people with the best intentions with social media, and maybe they're not trying to, maybe they're trying to have a really helpful account. Like, I still think it can be really easy to compare to that person. And bottom line, at the end of the day, what we're posting on social media are going to be pictures that we like about ourselves. Like, we're like you said, you're choosing what you're putting out there, right?
Yeah.
So, even if someone does have the best intentions, I think that's great. And, the people who are following them just kind of have to remind themselves, okay, I really like this person. This person actually does have, maybe it's an eating disorder recovery account. This person does have a helpful eating disorder recovery account. And, I also have to keep in mind that, I kind of need my own tools for recovery.
Exactly.
And I make sure I'm not comparing.
Exactly. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. Can you discuss I know it's probably not HIPAA, but you probably can't discuss much, but any success stories or impactful moments you've had in working with clients struggling with body concerns and eating disorders?
Yeah, I love this question because I do think it's important to highlight the progress that people have made in recovery. Oftentimes when, I'm working with clients, they feel like there's no light at the end of the recovery tunnel, right? It's just their eating disorder. It can be really, really hard. It feels like they're kind of traveling through this uphill cave or whatever, and kind of keep slipping and sliding. So I think I've worked with so many clients who are doing amazing in recovery of all ages too, adult clients, teen clients, little kiddos who are doing so much better than they were when they first started seeing me. I've worked with plenty of clients who no longer see me because they consider themselves to be recovery or stable in recovery. Yeah. And all that is just awesome. And, I think if you're listening and you have an eating disorder, just keeping in mind that recovery, it is possible. It does take time. It can be really, really hard work and really scary. But you can do it.
Absolutely. Thank you for emphasizing that message. And I love that you mentioned that people don't see you anymore because they're getting better. I hope they keep in touch though, and let you know how they're doing. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
If I can ask, how did you get into, being a dietitian and specializing in helping those with eating disorders?
Yeah, I always loved food, which might sound really silly, but I feel like, I grew up in the kitchen with my Italian grandmother. We would make bread and pasta and
Italian girlies unite. I'm also Italian, so
yeah. So we would make all that awesome, yummy food. And then when I was I actually in high school, I thought it would have been interesting to be major in psychology and maybe become a therapist. Yeah. But then I decided I didn't want to do that. And then I actually I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I discovered that nutrition was major. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'm going to be, I'll be a dietitian. Yeah. I think my original intentions with becoming a dietitian was I did want to help people, quote unquote, get healthier. Now I feel like my intentions have changed a little bit, but I never really wanted to help people go on and off fad diets. I feel like I've always, wanted people to do what worked for them, if that makes sense. And I think over time it kind of morphed to aligning with intuitive eating, aligning with health at every size, and working with people with eating disorders. I think those two things really well with this population. And then it's kind of cool because I get to do, I don't do therapy, but like, again, that's something that I thought of doing in the past. So it kind of like blends really well together, just obviously like in the mental health kind of clinical field in general.
That's really cool. And you're helping a lot of people. So I know younger you would be very proud of yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Of course. And as a registered dietitian to be, I look up to you. I think what you're doing is amazing and you're very inspiring to me. So
awesome. Well, good.
So my last question for you is, what advice do you have for individuals who may be seeking support for their own struggles with body image or an eating, disorder or eating behaviors in general, but may be hesitant to reach out for help?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think two things. The first is eating disorders thrive off of shame and secrecy. So just remembering that like you're not alone, you are not the only person like in this world, or probably even the only person that is struggling with your, relationship with food, because it is something that's really common. So just remember that like eating disorders thrive off of shame and secrecy. So that kind of leads into the second thing of like playing with the idea of like what it would be like to tell at least one trusted person. Is that your friend? Is that a guidance counselor at school? Is that, if you're already in therapy, maybe that's your therapist, parents, right? Your partner. So kind of playing with the idea of like, all right, what would it be like to tell one trusted person? And then they can kind of help me figure out next steps too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that message. I think it's very important. And I think just knowing you're not alone and talking to someone that you trust is definitely a big step. So thank you so much. Thank you for being on my podcast and for sharing everything that you know and what you do in your field. I think it's very important and it's going to impact a lot of people. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Rylan.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this new episode of the Take Care of Your Body by Rye podcast. An estimate of 28.8 million Americans are suffering from an eating disorder globally. And if you or someone you know is suffering from an eating disorder, reach out to the National Eating Disorder Association hotline at 800-931-2237 because help is always out there. And a reminder, you are not your struggles. Thanks for listening, and as always, with love, Rye.